What are we gonna do? What are we gonna be doing?
All right, howdy friends. Guthrie Trapp here, coming to you from East Nashville, Tennessee. I know it's been a minute. It's been a crazy week, and partly because I'm happy to say I got a little bit of a special treat for you here, as I think you can already imagine what's going to happen here in just a second. But I've got my lovely parents here, Mary Trapp and Joe Trapp, and I thought while they're here, staying at the house, and probably for a little bit longer than planned, even because of the hurricane that's about to hit the Gulf Coast tomorrow or the next day. Not going to be playing any guitar here, but we are going to be asking Joe and Mary some questions. And this is pretty impromptu. We were literally almost falling asleep on the couch a minute ago, snacking and napping, as we call it here, and just catching a little downtime with these two here. So I wanted to ask you guys, I've been thinking a little bit about some of the questions I wanted to ask you, but I'm kind of throwing this on them unrehearsed, as you know how I like to do it. And so had a great gig at Rudy's Jazz Club the other night. They were there, and then the next night we've been playing a bunch live in Nashville here, which has been awesome. But anyway, this is not going to be a super long video, but what I wanted you to meet these two and get a little bit of an idea of where some of this stuff came from. So I wanted to ask you guys, how did you develop such a good taste and love for what we consider high nutrients, musical nutrients, good music? What was the first time that you guys got turned on to good music?
Ladies first, go ahead, Mom.
Well, my first experience was really when I left Maryland and came down to Lillian, Alabama, where Joe's family were living. And his brothers, Jim and Jerry, were already following Newgrass Revival with Sam Bush and Bela and John Cowan and all those guys. So for me, I was pretty much influenced by them. Other than when I had my civil service job in Hyattsville, I went to a James Brown concert at the University of Maryland, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then listening to music with my Aunt Aggie, she liked Hank Williams and Patsy Cline, and she liked to sing, and so she was a huge influence as well in my earlier years.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys grew up at a time where the music, even the popular music, would be considered maybe by some better and more higher quality, but better songs and stuff like that, maybe. But your first concert was that James Brown concert, right?
Yes.
That was your first concert.
Yeah.
First concert, James Brown. That's pretty good. And then so Jim and Jerry, how did they get turned on to?
Well, let me interject here. We're going to go to concerts. Let's go to the Cat Stevens concert when Mary was pregnant with Guthrie. Tell them a little bit about that one. Was that Mobile?
That was in Mobile, and I was 5 or 6 months pregnant, and we sat up pretty close to the stage, and I think Guthrie was already hearing music then.
That's the modern era from the 70s when we got turned on to that, because my brother and younger brother was already learning how to play guitar. But fast forward backward to when we were kids, my parents were German, Austrian, and my mom loved to polka. And before the war, my dad used to play some accordion, and we had not just polka music, but they liked Mitch Miller and all the sing-along stuff. And then our generation went to Pete Seeger with all the generation stuff. But we had Bavarian folk music in the house and polkas, and my parents even sent me to an accordion school when I was 10 years old. I wish it would have stuck, but it didn't. And so we always had music in the family. Of course, the Trapps, were a little bit connected to the Von Trapps, but Pat Crawford at the public station in Pensacola used to say, he said, I asked Joe about were they related to the Von Trapps, and he said, well, we think we are, but we dropped the Von because we're not royalty, but we like to be known as the Van Traps, and the vans are in the parking lot.
I did say Mary Trapp and Joe Trapp, I think. I want to make sure I got both of you. And then your grandfather was a saxophone band leader.
My grandmother, we got from Chicago down to Lillian because of my mother's family came in and were in a German community of farmers. But my grandmother married a musician in Chicago, a saxophone and clarinet player, and he didn't want to leave Chicago and move down to Alabama because there was no music happening there. We're talking 1920s. And so my grandmother raised my mom and my uncle in Chicago, but my grandfather was a German band leader and played saxophone and clarinet.
And then I heard the story that he got his fingers cut off, and they custom made a saxophone for
That's
him.
right.
Correct?
He worked in a factory and he lost a couple of knuckles, and so where the clarinet and the buttons on the clarinet and on the saxophone, he had them extended so he could reach them with just his first knuckle and not his fingertips. So we don't have any recordings of any of that music. I don't know how, there might be some there, but we never got any recordings of any of that music.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of, I wouldn't be able to do anything I can do now or have the feel for music and the ear for music versus the, more conventional, way of learning music at a school or by a book or something like that. And so I always like to talk about the spirit of making music, which means feeling it and hearing it and getting to the end result, which is playing music with some feel and some soul to it. So the older I get, the more I think of the fact that if you're around really good music, as our friend Uncle Larry says, high-end musical nutrients, good songs, people that are playing in tune and in time, and you're around good music. You're hearing good melodies and good tone from birth and even before birth with these two, and so I never had my earliest memories of growing up were falling asleep on your shoulder, being carried out of a picking party at midnight, and having been surrounded by musicians and artists for 5 or 6 hours, and the party always revolved around music. These were wholesome, family-friendly environments where there were people that were, drinking and smoking and all this stuff, but it was a different. They always revolved around music. We never went to a party that never revolved around music, and if we ever did, you eat a couple appetizers and you leave because there's nothing going on.
We were lucky.
So we were very lucky.
Really
So
lucky.
I call them the 1% of the Gulf Coast because they knew all the cool musicians and artists down in a very kind of area that just doesn't have a lot of musicians and songwriters. And so we were lucky to have the Floribama and the Frank Brown Songwriters Festival. That was our little vein to Nashville that kept that going. And if I would have grown up in Montgomery or some smaller town, we might not have had any of this. So it's kind of like the time machine in Back to the Future, where they say, don't alter anything. If you go back in time, you can't even change one thing because it's going to change everything. I wouldn't want to change anything going back. I mean, quitting school.
We'd be afraid to. It worked out so well.
It worked out so well. I'd be afraid to change anything.
Same
And
with
so
me.
they didn't know what to do with me in school. I was a terrible student, and I knew I wanted to play music from a young age, even subconsciously. And so they didn't really know what to do with me. They weren't going to send me to Berkeley College of Music in Boston. I mean, these were things that we just didn't. Grew up in a small town in Alabama on the Gulf Coast. We didn't even go to New Orleans or anywhere. So somehow we had this Nashville connection through the Songwriters Festival and Meet and Go, Scrivener, and these guys like that, and that just turned out to be a pretty amazing thing. But I remember down there, I never really had a babysitter. You guys just didn't dump me on a babysitter and go to those music, the picking parties, we called them, the picking parties.
No, it was all
So-
about family.
So you guys took me with every
Yeah.
time to go to those parties,
Yeah, you were always with family. Yeah.
Yeah, and And so they, the education thing, which, I've gotten over that now because things have worked out pretty well. But, you guys didn't really know what to do with me as far as schooling. We tried homeschooling. We tried different schools in Pensacola and Alabama, and they all kind of sucked. And eventually I think you guys just kind of said, I think he's going to, this music thing might kind of work out.
Well,
here's what we did know. Excuse me. Here's what we did know. We saw something special there, and we knew that we wanted to support that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we made sure that we got you around plenty of good music.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we went to the music festivals, and
Mm-hmm.
our friends, we had friends who were great players, and they had gatherings, and you went to a lot of those with us, and
Yeah.
that's when you see that your child has a special gift, then you want to support that.
It was like water in a garden,
And that's what we
just
did.
cultivating it. Yeah.
Well, starting in the late '80s, when Guthrie was about 7 or 8 years old, having listened to my brother play and listened to some music playing, he started gravitating to where my brother Jerry was in his bedroom, was playing. Never had a TV, and somebody showed him some chords when he was 13, and they just went in right to the music spot. And when he learned, he could hear the changes on the records from Dylan and John Prine and Tony Rice and Norman Blake, and he was hearing those changes. He just started playing, and to this day, people say, "Oh, you're the Trapp brother that taught Guthrie how to play." And Jerry would always say there wasn't a lot of teaching going on. I just played, and he listened, and we witnessed that going on from about 7 years old, the late '80s. Every day. And the homeschooling was an idea that, well, we knew there was something happening with the music between the two of them. We could see some magic starting to happen. And when we saw that was interfering with school, then we didn't know what to do, but we didn't want to interfere with that. So we took them out of school a couple times, once in junior high and then right after high school, and tried to implement, because we thought homeschooling was a pretty cool thing. But we had a pretty clumsy homeschooling. We'd give Guthrie some assignments to do, and then we'd take off, and he'd stay with Jerry at my mother's, where my brother was living. And he told us one time, "Don't expect me to be as good in math as I am in this music." And then from then on, the connections to the music people in the area were like magnets. The word got out that there was this kid playing a little music, and 10, 11, 12-year-old birthdays, his best friends were 40-year-old guitar players showing up at the birthday party. We thought, oh, this is going to be a little awkward, but it all worked out. And
those parties actually turned into a pretty famous thing down on the Gulf Coast, which it kind of took on the name of Trapp Fest, because all these people, they were like, "Man, you got to name this something and charge people tickets." Well, that never happened, but those parties turned into be pretty epic down there. I think the one that ran the longest in the heyday was like 8 days. The bonfire burned for 8 days straight. And I remember you in the kitchen one time, and it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and there was still somebody camped out in the yard. We said, "Hey man, we got to get back to reality here." But those were some pretty epic parties. It was like nonstop, 24 hours a day, music and campfire. And then what happened with those was my time here started overlapping the time there, and I developed more friends here, and those people couldn't come down, and I kind of lost interest in it and got busy, and life evolves and happened. But that was a pretty fun thing too. But I just wanted to introduce them on here and ask a couple questions and get them talking a little bit about some of the early days, because there's been a lot of memories and a lot of territory covered in those 42 years of this whole thing, and I got to start writing some of these stories down, because there's an awful lot of them, and they keep coming every day. Now the momentum is going to where, even we've been joking around a little bit over the past couple days, and I will kind of humble brag a little bit, but the phone calls in the past 2 days that you guys have been here have been Billy Gibbons, Jerry Douglas, Dennis Quaid, and John Oates. These are becoming my close friends here, and it's pretty pretty surreal, really. I mean, to sit and think that, you know, guys that we idolized as a kid and records that they played, and these guys were like larger than life characters and heroes. These are my friends now, you know, and it's pretty wild. I'm a lucky dude, that's for sure, and it's all because of these two right here, you know.
Well, it's very special for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we love coming up here because there's something new all the time.
Yeah, it's something new all the time. Well, we'll call this episode 1, and maybe before they leave, we'll actually maybe sit down and jot down some questions, or if you have any questions you'd like to ask Joe and Mary while they're here for another couple days or 4 days or whatever they're here, we'll try to do another little maybe an episode 2 and episode 3 of this. We'll call this Meet the Traps. So thanks a bunch, guys. Check out the links below, and of course, you know, anything you see on here, if you want to do the deep dive, check out Artist Works, full curriculum, private, online, Zoom and Skype lessons with a full video. There's some testimonials I want to put up, but these guys are really getting a lot out of it. I'm learning how to be a better teacher and really coming up with some good, you know, ways to teach some things that are. I don't like to say shortcuts, but I think I'm actually getting to a place now where I can actually help you shave, you know, 5-10 years off of some of these things and get you looking at some things differently. Anyway, check those out below. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks a bunch. Sorry it's been a minute since I've done a video. It's just been pretty crazy and been hanging with these two here. So Joe and Mary Trapp here.
Joe, Mary, don't get us confused.
I think you can figure that out. But anyway, thanks a bunch, guys. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.